Who's all got ink on their paper by this point?
I got no ink.
I got like one dot.
Okay, so if you were to
I got a little dot.
grab this piece of paper full on, you'd get ink all over it, right?
Can I do that?
Actually,
Yeah,
I
grab
have
it.
ink on.
Alright, now you could hold that piece of paper. I see some of you doing it in between your fingers. Can you do anything else with your hand when you're doing that?
No.
Could you-
I can brush my teeth. I can brush my teeth.
So you're limited, right?
Well, kinda.
Eventually you're going to get ink on that piece of paper. Alright? So we're going to jump all the way to the other end of our story at this point and talk about, you've still got ink on your fingers, right?
Kinda.
Okay. So that ink,
Listen.
that ink represents sin. Alright, for us it gets our hands dirty. Alright, it affects our ability to do things. Alright, we can't keep the paper clean. If we'd start to touch each other, we couldn't keep each other clean. It represents how our sin starts to contaminate our relationships with one another. Alright, it just gets things dirty, it gets in our way. You could sit there and hold that piece of paper and maybe not get ink on it, but the sin is still on your fingers, and as soon as you try to do something, ink's getting on the paper. It limits what we can do, alright? That sin breaks the relationship between us. Who has come to take away the sin of the world? God through Jesus, right? So, Jesus has come. We're going to focus on that story really specifically in the spring, but what Jesus does is just like this towel is going to take the ink off your hands. I'm going to give you all a
It's a
towel.
white.
A white.
It's a white.
That's Travis.
Same difference. Yes, thank you.
So, now I want you to clean off your hands. So the paint is kind of hard to get off, right?
Yes.
So, sin is a difficult part of our lives. What these stories in Genesis 3 and 4 communicate is that the sin between us and God and us and each other, it's with us a lot. Alright? While we are here in this world, we will never fully be able to get rid of that sin. Alright? We will never be able to fully get rid of that sin on this side of God's kingdom in our mortal world. Alright? But what God has done is God has acted very specifically in our lives through the person of Jesus Christ to where our relationships can keep going. And here the symbol is the cross. Alright? So, our relationships, the way we are able to be in relationship with God is through Jesus. The way we are able to be in relationship with one another is through Jesus. Sin is going to stick with us, alright? The ink is going to come back. Relationships will get stepped on and broken. And so this is something we're constantly working on in our lives. But through Jesus, we are given the power to do this. Alright? We are given the power to be in relationship with God. We are given the power to be in relationship with one another. It's called forgiveness. If y'all were here on Sunday, I preached on that, on forgiveness. How we work on our forgiveness with one another. Is forgiveness easy? No, it's hard, right? It's hard work. If we ignore it or try to walk away from it, it still follows us around. Right? It's just like that ink on your hands. You could sit there and try to ignore the ink and do something else, which you'd smear it on the paper, smear it on your face, smear it on your neighbor. The ink is going to go all over the place. That towel gets us clean. Right? We're going to talk a little bit more about baptism later, and that's how that works with God. So, our relationships, though broken, that's not the end of the story. Just like God doesn't kill Adam and Eve, God goes with them out of the garden. Just like God doesn't strike vengeance against Cain, God somehow provides a way to establish the relationship. Alright? So, recap. Everything's going great in the garden, and then what happens?
Satan comes along.
Snake comes along and does what? Says to Eve,
What?
hey, it'd be great to eat this fruit. What does Eve do? Eats the fruit. Then what does she do?
She makes her husband.
Takes it to Adam,
Takes
who
it to me.
eats the fruit.
And then makes me eat.
And then
So, that does what?
And
Breaks-
then their relationship's broken to God.
That's right. Breaks the relationship between them and God. They get kicked out of the garden, but God is still with them. We get to the story of the brothers, Cain and Abel, the farmer and the rancher. What happens?
He kills
Murder.
Cain gets what? He gets angry and jealous and murders Abel. But somehow God works through that and establishes that relationship. There's a way that they can continue. All right. It's 6:30. So those of you that've got to leave at 6:30, it's time for that.
Dang.
Pastor Travis, I have a
Yes.
question.
Yes, Jairus. Shh.
Why, since God is like the creator of man, why didn't he just like bring Abel back to life?
Let's be a zombie.
It's a terrible question. He could have spun up God's life. And then like he could have said, I was like, I'm sorry, I got jealous, and he could apologize to his dead brother when he's
That's
not
how God works.
So why didn't he bring him back to life?
Because that's not how God works. There are consequences to our actions. If God was always there to bring people back to life and to right our wrongs, then somehow the relationship wouldn't be complete. We'd almost be like robots. And God didn't create robots. God created fully functioning human beings that have decisions to make, and there are consequences to the decisions that we have to make. So there are some really hard things that we encounter in our lives. But we know that God works through Christ. And that's a very, very, very hopeful thing for us, is that God has somehow, amidst our brokenness and amidst our ability to mess things up, God has still managed to preserve a relationship with us so that we can preserve our relationships with one another.
Actually, Tuesday that school started,
Mhm.
I had to leave that Monday
Mhm.
because my uncle had died, and I had to church that way while I was actually really sad. So I just started reading the Bible from the beginning, and I pretty much got through all of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So I
Yeah.
just read this morning.
Yep. So this is a good review.
Yeah.
All right. So now we got to do a little bit of fast forwarding. So that's Genesis chapter 3 and chapter 4. We got to do a little bit of fast forwarding. This is probably about 10 generations worth of people. There's lots of names. We're not going to read them all. But basically we get the descendants on down the line to a gentleman by the name of Noah. All right. So we're going to talk about Noah as our next session this evening. And basically by the time we get to Noah, things aren't going very great in the world. There's lots of violence. This whole broken relationship between us
It's broken again.
is broken really, really, really bad. All right? Wickedness is the word that the Bible uses. All right? Everybody turn to Genesis chapter 6. It's on page 56 in your Bibles. Genesis chapter 6.
Too fast.
Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. Once you get it,
Got it.
hold there.
Got it.
All right, when you've got it, look at me. If I can see your eyes.
Are you on?
No.
That's right. Forgot it, I'm sorry.
What the heck does that mean?
It's
Ears.
For what?
All right,
I don't know.
so bear with me. We've only got a little bit of time left. We've got to fast forward through a lot of these stories. So, in Genesis, the story of Noah and the great flood takes place over 3 chapters. It's Genesis 4 chapters, 6, 7, 8, and 9. But it all gets kicked off here in verse 5. Can I get a volunteer who hasn't read anything tonight, who didn't get to read earlier?
No, I read. Oh, she did.
Everybody left and didn't read.
I'll read.
Hold on. Shh. Everybody listen to Dane. Dane, you're going to read verse 5 and verse 6.
The Lord saw the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continuously. And the Lord was sorry, and he had made humankind on earth, and it grieved him to his heart.
Oh, hold on there. So, continual evil. God looks down on earth. Remember, God created earth, and it's what? Words. It's beautiful, but what's the word God uses?
Good.
Good, right? And so, creation is good, and all of a sudden God looks down, and there's evil all over the place. And how does the author say God reacts? What happens?
With grievance in his
Grieved in the heart. God's sad, right? I mean, this good creation is broken. These relationships between us and each other, and probably the relationship between us and God, is way out of hand. All right, things are messy. All right, somebody pick up in chapter 7. Kagan, can you pick up in verse 7? Everybody listen.
The Lord said, I will blot out from the earth human beings I have created, people together with animals and creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them.
One more verse.
But Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord.
All right. So God's initial decision is to do what?
Flood the earth.
Flood the earth. Wipe everything out. All right. We'll blot everything from the earth. So God's going to hit reset. But God finds favor in the sight of Noah. So, to fast forward a little bit to get us to the main point of this story, God tells Noah to do what?
build an ark.
Build an ark. Build a great big boat. We're talking huge boat so you can save you and your family
And tons of animals.
and tons of animals. 2 of every kind, right? So we've got animals coming from all over the place. The ark probably smelled great, right?
Yep.
Oh,
No,
absolutely.
not at all.
And needed
All right.
a lot of Febreze.
Febreze.
Yeah, a lot of Febreze. All right, so we have a huge boat full of Noah and the animals, and it starts to rain. Rains for how long?
40 days and 40 nights.
40 days and 40 nights is what the story tells us. So that's lots of water.
Isn't that as long as Jesus was trapped in the desert?
That's right, that's as long as Jesus is in the wilderness. But it's not just rain, something else happens. Remember back at the beginning of creation, God's Spirit moves over the face of the what?
Right.
Face of the earth. There's a particular word that I don't think we focused on. It's called deep. God's Spirit moves over the face of the deep. That's a clue for us in the story for chaos, right? The chaos at the beginning of creation. Well, here, if we read the story of Noah, it's not just rain from the sky that falls, but God also pulls the stopper on the deep places, and water of chaos gushes back out into the world, and things get crazy. All right, the whole earth is flooded. Noah and his family and the animals are pitched about on the boat for 40 days and 40 nights. And then there's, I think, 150 days still that they've got to be on this ark. Tempers get high. It doesn't smell good. People are Noah and his family are wondering, are we going to get out of this? And so we fast forward all the way to chapter 9. All right? All the way to chapter 9. So, after it stops raining, Noah's wondering if the water is ever going to subside. He starts to send out birds. He sends out a raven. Raven comes back. Sends out a raven again. Raven comes back. Sends out a dove. The dove brings back what? Olive branch. What's that?
For 2 days?
So it'd come back for a while. First dove comes back with an olive branch, which means that something's growing again. And then the dove, the last time, just doesn't come back at all, which means we're good. There's land. We can exit the boat. So we're going to pick up Genesis chapter 9. I'm going to read verse 1. Follow along with me. God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." It's an important reminder. It's an allusion back to the first creation story. What does God tell the animals and the plants? Be fruitful and multiply. God tells humanity, be fruitful and multiply. So here, that same command from God comes again. So there's a promise of prosperity. You've been given this place to live and to work and to be in relationship with one another. Now, there's a certain sign that's also attached to Noah and the flood. What is that sign? Rainbow, all right? When we get a good rain sometimes, we still see that rainbow. That's what we're going to focus on in our small groups is that rainbow, okay? So, Keisha's got some sheets for your small group.